Have you ever noticed that in a lot of conservative Presbyterian churches, there aren't any images of Jesus anywhere? Even in children's Sunday school materials, when covering the gospel narratives, you'll see images of various characters in those stories, but none of Jesus. And if you haven't been in these circles for very long, this might seem strange. After all, most Protestant churches don't have crucifixes with the body of Jesus on them anywhere, but they still will have those images of Jesus in a number of other contexts, such as evangelistic materials, children's Sunday school materials, Bibles, children's Bibles, and of course manger scenes. So we might ask then, why are Presbyterian churches different in this respect? We can start by looking at the history. Throughout the history of the Reformed tradition, the majority or consensus position has been that these images are not acceptable, despite the modern widespread acceptance of them. And we can see that when we look at two of the oldest documents of Reformed theology that summarize some of the key positions of this tradition. So we can start by looking, for example, at the Westminster Larger Catechism answer 109, which says, "The sins forbidden in the second commandment are the making any representation of God, of all or of any of the three persons, either inwardly in our mind or outwardly in any kind of image or likeness of any creature whatsoever." Similarly, we could look at the Heidelberg Catechism. Lord's Day 35 includes the following answers as it deals with the second commandment. It says, "God requires that we in no wise make any image of God, nor worship him in any other way than he has commanded in his word. God may not and cannot be imaged in any way. As for creatures, though they may indeed be imaged, yet God forbids the making or keeping any likeness of them, either to worship them or by them to serve himself." So we see this historically has been the position of the Reformed tradition and therefore of Presbyterian denominations, and because these Presbyterian denominations, this is important because these Presbyterian denominations generally will have one of these two catechisms in their constitution. And so it shouldn't be a surprise as a result that many of these Presbyterian churches, particularly conservative ones, will try to avoid using these images. But perhaps it's not very satisfying to simply say, the catechism says this, so that's the answer. We could also look at some of the rationale that has been provided by theologians over the years with respect to this question. Why does the catechism, why does Reformed theology tend to avoid these images? Why does it take this position? And we can look at this in a number of ways, but let's look at two reasons in particular. The first is that our images of Christ are false representations of God, and second, that images in general will detract from the Word of God. So first of all, we don't know, of course, what Jesus looked like. We have no revelation from the Bible. Our images of Jesus are going to simply be human conjecture. We don't know anything. We don't have sufficient description of him in the Bible to be able to make an image of him that would be representative. Of course, you could say the same thing about people like Paul and Mary. We have no information about them, and yet we don't have a problem in Presbyterian churches making representations of them. But of course, the difference between them is that Jesus was no mere human. He was God incarnate, and he is God incarnate. He had and continues to have a human body, which we can never ignore. We have to always recognize that he does have a human body. But at the same time, we recognize that his human and divine natures cannot be divided. So if you make an image of his body that is false, you are falsely imaging, you're making a false representation of the divine nature as well as the human nature. And if you make a false image of the divine nature of God, then that is a violation of the second commandment and will prompt worship that is not true worship. The second reason then, the second argument we can make here is that images distract from the revelation of God. God, in his wisdom, gave us what? He gave us the Bible. The Bible is, of course, words. It's expressed to us. His revelation to us is expressed to us in words, not in images. He didn't give us images. So, if we begin to rely on images for information about God, we are necessarily relying, first of all, of course, on human imagination for those images. But second, we're also distracting ourselves from the revelation that God did give us. And God gave us words. God gave us the Bible. So in that circumstance, why would we want to emphasize images? So we could go on with some other arguments here, but instead let me emphasize that there are many Christian Reformed excellent theologians that have evaluated this issue and have come to a position that does not completely agree with the catechisms that we read earlier. Many Reformed theologians today would consider the limited use of some images of Jesus in circumstances like Sunday school materials for children, in general educational contexts. And so whenever in situations like this, where we're not dealing with perhaps one of the fundamentals of the faith, we have to recognize that our convictions, we have to pair our convictions with charity. So if this is interesting to you, if you have questions about it, or you'd like to read a little bit more, take a look below. I'll put some resources there. I hope this video was helpful for you. As before, if you're interested in this content in Spanish, feel free to click the link that's here on the screen, and we will talk soon. I hope that you also will subscribe and like this video if it was helpful. Thanks a lot.